Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What another day it has been. Just another kind of crazy day. Yesterday, the Supreme Court goes and takes the cake case. So I guess we're going to be talking about cakes. Yes, let them eat cake. Oh, no, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. No cake for you. Let them eat cake was back. So the question is Alabama going to come down to a slice of cake? I tell you, just crazy. Honestly, just crazy. But before we get into all that, my day, again, I have to say, and this is one of those moments where give conservatives the credit that they're due. Give the anti-government people the credit that they deserve. Give the privatization folks all of the kudos and the pats on the back as I spent a good portion of my morning at the DMV. And I know, wonderful. Is it me, or have Republicans done enough to make our lives miserable by really squeezing what government does? So I have a commercial driver's license. I drive a truck sometimes. I did it for a long time for a main portion of my living. Was against the idea of a CDL back in I think it was 92 when it was finally implemented. It was, again, another Reagan era infringement on people's, and it was bipartisan. Both Democrats and Republicans were on board. The Commercial Motor Vehicle Safety Act of '86 was all the rage. Gave the Federal Highway Administration the ability to, what they were saying, we're going to improve safety, which I would argue they have. But they've issued a national driver's license. And I said at the time, and I was a much younger man then, much less wise, I think. Although if you asked me back then, I knew it all. So this is going to lead us to a national driver's license, a national ID for all of us. And it has. The Real ID Act of 2006, I believe it was, thanks to James Sensenbrenner, slipping that into a defense appropriation bill. Now we have the ability, Pennsylvania is in trouble right now because they passed a law saying, nope, we're not doing it. So I'm guessing we're never going to be allowed in a federal building with a Pennsylvania driver's license. But they created the CDL, the commercial driver's license. And, at the time it was, you had to take a test and you had to prove some competency, which I'm all in favor of. But since the terrorist attack of 9/11 and since the Patriot Act, they've added a whole bunch to it. Now there's a terror risk assessment. I have to prove every 4 years that I'm not a terrorist. Now, I guess in those 4 years, who knows? But, once every 4 years, I have to go and I have to be fingerprinted. I have to fill out a form, and they do a risk assessment on me to see if I can jam gears. And in this day and age, you don't even have to know how to drive a clutch anymore because most of the trucks on the road are automatics. They're basically idiot-proof. And I've been saying for a long time, it's kind of a dumb thing that we even worry about truck drivers because you don't need really a lot of skill to drive a gas truck into a building. You just have to be really stupid. So this is just part of what conservatives and the pro-safety people want to give us the illusion that we're being safe. So I go and I take my hazmat test, which, I got all the questions right, and I go take my paper, and they're like, well, you need your birth certificate, a passport, underwear size, firstborn child's blood type, all just this nonsense. I'm like, oh, okay, so we're producing all this stuff. And I go, okay, so I have to go get my fingerprints again. It's not like you don't have them right there. I have to go to the state police, right? And they go, no, they don't do that anymore. They've privatized that. And you have to go online. Again, everything back to online. And this is just my little pet peeve. Right to back online. I have to schedule an appointment with an approved fingerprint center, which I guess happens to be in my neighborhood, a library. which I'm trying to figure out why the library is taking on fingerprints. or even that that's what we should want. But here again, the guy behind the counter is telling me, look, this is all part of the privatization stuff. Eventually, all this stuff will be done by private interests, and it's a money-making scheme. And, the three people that I was talking to in line who were, kind of, frustrated because they, like me, didn't have all the things that they needed to jump through these hoops and do all this stuff. And immediately one guy, and I wouldn't be talking about this other than if this one conversation, he came out with damn liberals. And I'm going, how is this damn liberals? How do you get there? How do you get there? Explain to me, how is it? Because understand, this was Libby Dole's doing. You may remember Elizabeth Dole, the former senator from North Carolina, also the wife of Bob Dole, former presidential candidate and senator from Kansas. And you may remember, as I do, because she didn't have really a great Senate career, wasn't much there, but she did get that light, that damn light in the rear view, in the back of your windshield, in the back of the back window, the little Dole light. That was her doing. And oh, by the way, this, the commercial driver's license, the Commercial Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1986. 86 was a horrible year. And, we're having this conversation. He's like, no, it's, it's these damn liberals. They're all in our lives, like government running all this stuff. And I'm going, the sad reality is conservatives have always talked about smaller, less intrusive government, except for things like this. And, I keep going back to all of the bad ideas that keep coming around, all of the privatization schemes, all of the hoops and the obstacles, and all of this stuff seem to emanate from conservative thought. Because they believe that, all working people are terrorists. They believe all welfare recipients are cheaters. They believe all people on disability are lying. And I guess that's just the world view that they have. And it's one of these just weird things that you have ideologues running our government. And, today there was a story came out at the AP that Trump has evidently appointed fewer people with advanced college degrees, like master's degrees, PhDs, into science fields than anybody else, ever. If it's got to do with science or the environment or, something that, I don't know, matters, just about 40% of the people that he nominates in roles that are confirmable by the Senate, just about 40% have advanced degrees. And you go, so I go back to, one of the questions that I brought up a long time ago, does the job application look like this? Do you believe in the mission of the institution? No. Do you know what the institution does? No. Do you want it to function? No. When can you start? I mean, that it just seems that way to me, that all of these people that are in charge of these positions are all, ideologues. And it's about making life difficult, because every person that I talked to walking out of that section of the DMV where I was walked out angry, walked out upset that, these just what seem to be unreasonable obstacles are put in their way. And that's almost every operation of government. I've talked to people who have tried to, sign up for unemployment, and boy, they've made a mess out of that. It used to be when I was younger, you went to the unemployment office. There was a bureaucrat who sat behind the table. He or she were not thrilled, but they helped you fill out the paperwork. And when you left, you knew if you were eligible for unemployment or not. Now it's a whole call on the phone, do on the internet, file paperwork. It's kind of nuts. Same thing with food stamps and LIHEAP and all of these programs that are meant to help people. There's always this obstacle of distrust. And it's rather frustrating. But it does come and play to the message of government's bad. And it does make you walk away with, I don't like the government very much. So when I walked away from this going, we've privatized even taking my fingerprints? Am I okay with this? And the answer is no. But again, this is another one of those moments where, budget cuts, starve the beast, look for ways to cut costs. Another one of those things that have just gone, we can move it over here. It'll cost us a little less. And every time we allow that to happen, and every time we see another massive tax cut like we're going to see here in the coming days, another redistribution of wealth from working people upward, another slashing of the tax revenues that used to be put into hiring people to take applications from the DMV or unemployment or wherever, people who used to make lives better. As those people lost their jobs and as those people were replaced by automation or privatization, our lives got a little bit more difficult. And people were telling me, well, at least we didn't raise your taxes. No, but my driver's license cost went up like double over the last 10 years. And you ask the question, when does it end? When do we say enough? Because I look at this tax scheme, I look at this and it just infuriates me. Because what we're doing, honestly and truthfully, what we're doing is we're funding the 1% or the 0.6% at the expense of everybody else. And we know that. I mean, that's the thing that gets me. We know it. We instinctively get it. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Or are we going to do anything about it? I don't actually know, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So lots to get to today. First up, we're going to talk about some special loopholes, some special things in the tax scheme. Because, look, they didn't have any hearings. There wasn't a lot of vetting of this piece of legislation, as big and as all-encompassing as it is. I don't even think they know what they're doing or what they've done. And this is going to be one of those things where, remember when Nancy Pelosi said, the more you learn about the Affordable Care Act, the more you're going to like it because we've hammered through all this stuff out. I think the more we find out about this tax bill, the more we find out about this scam, the more really ticked off we're going to be. And as I said the other day, this is an opportunity for Democrats to get their you-know-what in order and to really next year hammer the Republicans over this, because there's nobody in here in the working class of this country who's spared. There's really not. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Going to take a quick break. Right back with Arthur Delaney after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2008. That was the day UE Local 1110 members at Republic Windows in Chicago began a 5-day occupation to protest the imminent closure of their plant. A month earlier, Republic workers witnessed management moving machinery out of the factory. They began monitoring where the machinery was going and soon learned it was headed for a new non-union plant in Iowa. They planned a possible plant occupation. By December 2nd, management announced the plant was closing in just 3 days. Republic Windows owner Richard Gelman blamed Bank of America for refusing to extend credit, just as the federal government had bailed out the banks in a $700 billion deal. Workers learned they would receive no severance or vacation pay despite WARN Act mandates. The next day, they rallied out in front of Bank of America, chanting, "You got bailed out, we got sold out." Workers were determined to occupy the plant that Friday when they went to pick up their last paychecks. Police refused to remove sit-downers, and the occupation quickly made national news. Local labor leaders and trade unionists, activists, and politicians all visited strikers and lent their support. Journalist Carrie Liderson recounts the events in her book Revolt on Goose Island, noting the donations of food, blankets, pillows, sleeping bags, and other necessities that poured into the factory. Protests of Bank of America spread across the country. By the following Wednesday, workers learned that though they could not keep their plant open, they would at least win severance and vacation pay. In 2012, some of those workers reopened that plant under the name New Era Windows as a worker-run cooperative. They specialize in energy-efficient vinyl windows. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
These actions will modify the national monument designations of both Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So some interesting polling out, if you look at it. 2 new polls out today on the Republican tax scheme. Both Gallup and Quinnipiac show about a 29% approval rating. Gallup has a 56% disapproval, while Quinnipiac 53% disapproval. Break it down by party lines. Republicans seem to favor it. Gallup 70%, Quinnipiac 67. Democrats not so much, 87 in the Gallup poll against, and 84 against as well. Independents, the coveted independents, they overwhelmingly disapprove of the plan as well. Only 25% approve in the Gallup poll, and only 27 approve in the Quinnipiac poll. Because look, we get it. We know what this is. This is a massive redistribution of wealth. This is a theft, the grand heist, if you will. And the more we learn, as I said, the more we learn about it, the more we're going to hate it, which is why I've asked Arthur Delaney to come talk with us. He's written a piece on, again, who are the winners in this? Looks like it's going to be the oil and gas industry. Arthur, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So, again, we know who the winners are. The winners are the big corporations, the very wealthy, and, well, now, according to your piece, big oil and gas, huh?
Yeah, my story today is about one of the changes, of several changes that they made in the middle of the night before they passed this in the U.S. Senate. And it's a change that is really emblematic of the way this bill has been sort of stitched together in a rushed fashion. And it's just to make sure that this one particular type of business, called a publicly traded partnership, benefits from a special deduction as much as other businesses that are taxed in a certain way. And it's the kind of thing that just, did they forget to put that in the first place? And was that why it had to be added in the middle of the night? It's just like a weird thing to have to stick in there. And I think that's important because the early Saturday morning vote really proved once and for all the way they're rushing through this without thinking it through adequately, because they made a huge error that they themselves ultimately realized they don't like by putting back in something called the alternative minimum tax, and Republicans in the House were there. Well, we got to take that out. And corporate executives were mad. And, it's clear that it'll come out, but it shows you that they are throwing stuff together as fast as they can, because I think there's a desire to not let people really have a long time to look at the bill.
No, I mean, because the more we learn about it, the more, at least people that I talk to on all political sides, the more they learn, the more they don't like. But here's the thing that gets me, Arthur. Republicans have been concocting these schemes for a very long time. I mean, there's nothing in this tax plan that I think surprises really anyone when you look at ideologically where the Republicans have been the last several years. It just seems to me all the stuff they've had laying around should have been good enough. They didn't even have to, I don't think they really had to throw this together like this.
Well, it's true that they have had this stuff laying around, and this is how they defend themselves. They say, well, sure, we have hearings on this bill, but we have had hearings on the various Republican priority items that they've put in the bill. But the problem is, when those things are all together, they can have unpredictable interactions, and that was actually the problem they had with the alternative minimum tax. Like, they haven't looked at their own legislation. They just know it's like a bunch of Republican priorities. I think the fortunate thing for people who are trying to make sense of it is that the most important details about this legislation are also the very simplest and easiest to understand. It's a big tax cut for corporations. The corporate rate would go from 35 to 20%. And everything else in the bill is sort of stuffed in there to paper over some of the revenue losses from that, to make sure other businesses that don't pay the corporate tax aren't overly disadvantaged by the lower corporate rate. But that's basically it. It's a tax cut for corporations, and the individual changes skewed toward benefiting the very wealthy.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I keep hearing, and maybe it's just something in my ears, but I keep hearing Trump and the Republicans tell me how this is going to just be the cat's meow. This is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread for the working class of this country.
Yeah, it's strange. You know, they wanted to pitch it as a middle class tax cut, and it's possible to do a tax bill that really benefits the middle class or lowers their taxes. But it's clear that the priority is the corporate tax cut, and that it's done all this other stuff that ostensibly simplifies the tax code, but it also partly offsets the revenue loss from the corporate cut, and that's why there are winners and losers up and down the income scale, and they're unable to unequivocally say that every middle-class household would definitely benefit from the plan. They have to say things like, oh, well, I don't know the individual circumstances of every family. Sure, there could be some who lose out. Well, if you didn't want them to lose out, they wouldn't. It's not that hard to give people a tax cut, but that's not really what they're doing. They're not doing this for households. They're doing this for businesses. And, against all evidence, they're saying, at the same time as they're saying, we'll help the middle class with tax relief, they're saying that the business tax cuts will supercharge growth and everyone's paychecks will go up. The only problem with that is they can't find any credible economists who will back them up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually in the trunk of the welfare queen driving around with the small family farmer who lost the farm because of the estate tax. I think they took it with them. No, not going with me on that one.
I'm not sure I completely follow that, but
well, I mean, it's like a lot of these things that they throw out at us, Arthur. The welfare queen's out there and she's destroying the welfare system, and the small family farmer who they can't find, who lost the farm because of the estate tax. It's a lot of these anecdotal kind of scenarios that they throw out at us that we're supposed to believe, that sound somewhat plausible, that if we give businesses more, we give the wealthy more, something should trickle down. And I remember the 80s, it was sold like rivers of gold and honey. It's going to come down on us, pouring down on us, and it's going to be the greatest thing ever. And yet, over and over and over again, the only thing that keeps pouring down is lower wages, higher debt for the working class, and less opportunity while we separate.
You know what? The estate tax is actually a great thing to focus on. The House version of the bill repeals it. The Senate version keeps it. They both double the size of the states that don't have to pay the tax. And they have said for years that it's a death tax that destroys small businesses. And the data really clearly show that that's not true at all, that it affects maybe 80 farms a year, and affect is not the same as destroy. Like in the worst case scenario, you sell some liquid assets, i.e. stocks, in order to cover your estate tax loan, or you get an IRS 14-year payment plan. But the result of their death tax talking points is that, and we did a survey that found this, people think that they're going to have to pay the estate tax.
Oh yeah, no. Look, I can't tell you how many truck drivers I've run into said, "Oh, when I die, my kids shouldn't have to pay tax." Like, I go, "You got $5.5 million laying around? Really?"
Yeah, exactly. Our poll found people with income, sizable number of people who earn like less than $50,000 a year thought they would have to pay the estate tax. Maybe they're optimistic, but I think the trouble here is that there's very dishonest political rhetoric and maybe a little hesitancy among journalists to push back, because taxes, are a little complicated and they do have a lot of confusing terms. For instance, what's an estate? All that word means is that's someone's stuff when they die.
Yep.
That's their stuff. but it's state, and there's exemptions and exclusions and deductions. But really, I think the tax terminology is serving a political purpose by making it seem a little more confusing than it really is.
Now, I got to tell you, I would love to pay the estate tax. I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you. I'll be the first one. I would love to pay the estate tax.
If you're paying the estate tax, you're one of
$5.5 million, man.
Yeah, you have to be one of the richest 0.2% of households. You
Exactly.
would have, if you're a married person, you have more than $11 million.
I mean, it's just amazing to me. But, here's the thing. You brought up a minute ago about loopholes and deductions and all of that stuff. I talk a lot about the tax bill of 86 and how, they lowered, they basically just slashed all the tax rates down to what I would argue, too low rates. But they did do away with, for a very short period of time, a lot of deductions and loopholes. One of the knocks against this scheme is they're lowering the corporate rate, yes, but they're not doing really away with any of the deductions. And look, that little snafu with the ATM, the alternative minimum tax, they'll fix that. But they haven't done away with any of the loopholes. So what's going to end up being, all of these loopholes will be there, and we're going to end up, at some point, I guess, paying corporations to be here.
Right. I mean, they get rid of some deductions, but others they increase. There are trade-offs. Like they're going to increase this deduction that businesses use to offset the cost of investing in new equipment. They're going to make that much bigger. And it's a sort of similar thing on the individual side. I think for the most part, individual household taxes would be simpler, but a lot of these deductions and loopholes are actually things that everybody uses if they earn less than $300,000. For instance, a personal exemption that takes your tax burden down for each member of your family.
Yep.
It's not really a loophole. It's for everybody, and they kind of paper over it by saying they'll double the standard deduction, even though they don't fully double it. And even if they did double it, that wouldn't make up for the other changes that they're making. So it's at best, a wash for lots of people who aren't in the upper income range.
Yeah, and especially for people who live where I do in Pennsylvania or in New York or Connecticut or California, high tax property, high local tax rates and high income tax rates that we get to write off. That's going to go as well. So the state and local stuff, gone.
This is another thing where the combination of effects of the bill, sure they've looked at changing the way deductions work and allowing people to itemize fewer things, but they don't know what's going to happen. For instance, you could see states and localities all across the country taking all their what used to be income tax revenue and trying to get it from people's property, because the bill would retain a property tax deduction. Right. So localities are going to shift the way they collect tax in order to compensate for the huge revenue losses that could occur if people are no longer able to deduct for their state and local taxes. I mean, which could, localities will have to do that because people losing that deduction could seriously harm revenue for states, which means schools. So there's this impetus, this imperative of cutting corporate taxes and then filling in some of the revenue through all these other changes. Incidentally touches so many different policies, and it's a weird to rush through it in a few weeks the way they're doing. And the Saturday goofs, I think, showed pretty clearly that they haven't completely thought through what could happen.
Yeah, good point. But here's the other question: where are the Tea Party people? Because look, this is clearly an increase on them as well. I mean, at the end of it, they were screaming about, "I'm taxed enough already, Arthur." This is going to raise their taxes. This is going to hit them, Trump voters, I would argue, just as hard as anyone else. Where are they at?
Well, that's another good point, and this is something people in Washington are debating. The fact that it takes away deductions for things like state and local taxes, it really is people in blue states like New York and New Jersey that have the highest local tax burdens. Other things in the bill target university endowments. The House bill targets student loan interest payment deduction. There's actually a lot of stuff in these bills, whether it's extremely deliberate or not. It targets people in blue states. It targets high-income Democrats. So I think there is actually a little bit of that kind of partisan geographical class war in there. It's not, they're not saying it explicitly, but that's why you've got Republicans who happen to be in those states like New York and New Jersey were one of the biggest problems they had getting this bill through the House.
Yeah, good point. Last question I've got for you. The big $4,000 check. I had a conservative Tea Party guy say, no, we're going to get a check. It's going to be $4,000. It's going to be just like we got when Bush was president, when we got our Bush Prize. Are there any big $4,000 checks coming around, or am I getting one? Because look, I could use it. Are we getting $4,000 checks? Are they coming?
That's funny. Under the Bush administration, they really did send out checks.
Yeah, in the worst way possible, but they did send out checks.
I mean, they cut taxes on everybody. There was no trade-off with deductions, no reform. They just cut taxes, but they also had a stimulus program where people received checks from the Treasury. There's nothing like that with this bill at all. In fact, if they wanted to, they could make their paychecks bigger. Congress and the Obama administration had a payroll tax holiday.
Yep.
For more than a year, that instantly, and for the entire duration it was in effect, increased every paycheck by 2%. If they wanted to engineer larger paychecks through the tax code, they could do that. But that was never on the table here. It's not something that the bill will do at all. The magical larger paychecks are things that come from economic growth, from corporations being happier. It's trickle-down economics. An idea that I had thought had been sort of laughed out of the room, like a few decades ago, but has come roaring back. It is the economic justification for these tax cuts, or at least the justification for why they would help middle class and working class people.
Yeah, the trickle-down unicorn is back. And again, we're going to get the short end of the stick again. And this is why I still think there's a chance we can, holler, yell, scream, do whatever, maybe stop some of this. But we shall see. Arthur, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing your thoughts. Good stuff.
Thanks for having me.
Always great. If you want to check out his article, we'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Highly suggested. It's oil and gas firms get a last-minute goodie in the Senate tax bill. Written by Arthur Delaney over at Huffington Post. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
These actions will modify the national monuments designations of both Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante.
Trump rolls back federal protections for 2 national monuments in Utah.
He doesn't even have enough respect to go visit those lands.
Native American tribes and conservation groups file suit to stop him. Republican tax bill slashes renewable energy. Plus, investment firm warns cities address climate risks or you'll be downgraded.
All of those uplifting downgrades straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I hope you all get coal in your stocking this year. In fact, tonight's show is brought to you by coal. Coal, it's hard oil, I think.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, Donald Trump is taking an unprecedented action to roll back presidential declarations by his predecessors?
Yes, President Donald Trump on Monday announced the largest rollback of protected lands in the history of the nation. At an event in Utah, Trump signed a presidential proclamation cutting 2 million acres out of 2 national monuments designated for special protection by President Obama and President Bill Clinton. He shrunk the size of Bears Ears National Monument by 85% and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument by 45%. In a strong dose of Orwellian doublespeak, Trump claimed that removing protections will protect the land.
Our precious national treasures must be protected, and they, from now on, will be protected.
So in removing the protection for the land to allow things like mining and drilling on it, Donald Trump is telling these people that he is protecting their land.
That's exactly right. His move means that these two monuments, which are big tourism draws due to their spectacular beauty and outdoor recreation opportunities, he will now open up those lands to mining, logging, and drilling and leave tens of thousands of Native American ruins, artifacts, and petroglyphs unprotected from looters. Regional Native American tribes had carefully worked for decades to secure federal protection for those areas. Navajo Nation President Russell Bagaye called it, quote, a sad day in Indian country and a sad day for Americans, noting that the government had already, quote, taken millions of acres of my people's land. Within hours, Native American tribes and environmental groups filed suit to stop those cuts. On MSNBC, Navajo Nation Attorney General Ethel Branch said the Trump administration did not consult with regional Native American tribes as they claimed.
He doesn't even have enough respect to go visit those lands and visit with the people who live in that community or the sovereign nations that call those lands their homelands. They think that talking to one Native American person, one Navajo person, constitutes consultation with the Navajo Nation, and he's gravely mistaken.
The legal battle to come could very well alter the course of American land conservation and open up other cherished protected lands for development.
I wonder how the Republicans' stolen U.S. Supreme Court will ultimately decide.
The massive Republican tax cut bill that was rushed to passage in the U.S. Senate late night on Friday must still be reconciled with the House version, but both versions take aim at the renewable energy industry and consumers by rolling back industry tax credits for large-scale utility, wind, and solar projects, and harming consumers by killing the $7,500 federal electric vehicle tax credit that helps average Americans purchase non-polluting electric cars. But Republicans kept the fossil fuel industry's billions in annual permanent tax breaks. Those are fine.
And those are permanent, as Republicans continue to pick winners and losers by picking oil and coal and dirty energy over clean energy.
Meanwhile, Bloomberg News reports that China has announced it is extending its electric vehicle tax rebate for consumers. Finally, global investment giant Moody's has a stark warning for U.S. cities. Address your climate risks or we will downgrade your bonds. Moody's Investor Service says it will now factor the cost of climate change impacts into its credit ratings for state and local bonds because governments that don't actively prepare for rising sea levels and more frequent extreme weather disasters are at much greater risk of default. Moody's managing director Lenny Jones said, quote, if you're exposed, we know that. We're going to ask questions about what you're going to do to mitigate that exposure, and that's taken into your credit ratings. But the Trump administration just made that more difficult on Monday, disbanding a multi-agency panel created by President Obama that was supposed to help cities prepare critical systems and infrastructure for resilience against the impacts of climate change.
Incredible that we have to rely on corporate credit bureaus to try to push states and cities to do the right thing, since our president will only do the opposite. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad, and this has been your Green News Report.
So give some credit where it's due. Give props to you know who, you know who. Give credit where it's due. Hey.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
All right, here we go. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So it looks like Ryan Zinke, the Interior Secretary, recommending that the president go ahead and again, we're going to steal some more land. I guess they're going to be shrinking the Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante national monuments in Utah. Going to also be going after a downsizing a monument there in Oregon and one in Nevada. And good, hey, and a couple other ones that we're going to go after because, hey, nothing says, future like in conservation, like, hey, let's sell off land to corporate interests. Yeah, I'm sure the Indian folk are going to be very thrilled with that. But look how they were treated. Like I said the other day, I was surprised Trump didn't show up with the big Chief Wahoo hat, wearing a Redskins jersey, and doing the Braves chop thing. Just sad stuff. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world in Washington, D.C. Lori Lewis, defense correspondent for Talk Media News. Lori, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick.
So I understand our president going to make a huge announcement tomorrow. Going to make the evangelical right wing. We want to meet God, folks, all tingly in the panties and really happy.
So what I think you're referring to is a decision expected tomorrow from President Donald Trump about moving the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And this decision has not yet been announced, but there's preliminary reporting saying that this is expected, and this doesn't mean that the president will actually move the embassy overnight. In fact, he's expected to sign a 6-month waiver, as the president does every 6 months, delaying the move, but lay out some sort of timetable, maybe not lay out some sort of timetable, but say eventually the U.S. is going to move its embassy to Jerusalem.
Well, before we get into the announcement and what the world is saying, why is this important? I don't get the why this is important. I mean, shouldn't this be up to the host country? What do we have to do with this?
So Israel acknowledges Jerusalem as its capital, and this is something that the U.S. and the rest of the international community has said that they're going to put their diplomatic personnel in Tel Aviv until the Palestinians and the Israelis can reach a settlement, whatever that settlement may look like, because Jerusalem is disputed territory. The Palestinians, for example, want to claim East Jerusalem as their capital should a two-state solution be the answer to this ongoing crisis. So Israel should be excited if President Donald Trump does make this announcement tomorrow.
Okay,
but Israel is one, out of every, not every, I can't say every, I haven't checked how every country is responding to this, but many countries in the region, most countries in the region.
No, I was reading some of the responses of other world leaders, and nothing good seems to come from this. And, what does this solve? I mean, does this move us any closer to resolving the conflict, or is this just saying to the Palestinians, well, the heck with you guys. We've now decided we've picked sides in this, and, well, it's the end for you. I mean, because that's kind of what I would think if I were them.
That's how they're saying that they are going to interpret this. They're saying that it officially, should the U.S. make this announcement and acknowledge Jerusalem as Israel's capital, it could mean that the U.S. loses its position as a neutral arbiter in, peace talks. So there's that potential. As far as what we gain from this, it's unclear. It could score President Donald Trump political points at home, rally his base at a time where he could use it. It could strengthen Benjamin Netanyahu, who's the leader of Israel, his relationship with President Donald Trump at a time when foreign leaders are growing increasingly wary of their relationship with the president and the White House. But in terms of what actually it will do for U.S. national security interests, that's unclear. And in fact, reports are out saying that the military is reshuffling personnel to further protect embassies in certain parts of the world, expecting potentially a violent response to the announcement.
No, I mean, is there no way that this region can figure this out? I mean, my entire lifetime, that this area has been in, if it wasn't Israel and Egypt, it's Israel and Palestine. I mean, is there no way of coming to some bit of agreement that they don't keep fighting and you don't have these kind of geopolitical shiftings going on?
That's a big question. That's a really, really big question. And I think people will tell you, we hope so. And I think people will tell you that they're working toward that. But you look at, the region, and it's a lot of it's divided based on based on borders that weren't decided by the people who actually live there,
Yeah.
and were imposed by the outside community. And these are things that have caused trouble in the last however many decades. There were
After
issues
World War
before
II.
that also.
Yeah, after
So-
World War II, you're right. They drew up a bunch of stuff and caused a lot of conflict. But I look at this and look, we've got a lot of problems going on in this country. Why would Trump want to throw, beat the hornet's nest with this? I mean, would this be that big of a distraction? Maybe from the Mueller investigation, maybe from how unpopular the tax scheme that they're ramming through is. Is this a diversion? Do you think, or is this something that he's truly passionate and interested in?
I do not know what exactly Trump is thinking. I do know, though, like I said, that this is something that will likely appeal to his base. And his base is who he has, right? He's shedded a lot of supporters since taking the White House, and has repeatedly said he wants to fulfill campaign promises that he made to them. So this could very well be part of that, fulfilling another campaign promise. Something similar to what we saw with the Iran nuclear deal, where he didn't totally decertify the deal and pulled the U.S. out of it, but he kicked that can to Congress. But you still got the headline saying Trump disavows the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah. So basically, he got the headline, he got his minute in the sun, and stirred up the hornet's nest, and probably made a situation much worse down the road. Got it. I think I've got it. Okay, let's move along. Let's come home. I understand that on the borders, the arrests of U.S. people inside the U.S., I guess, up on the immigration front.
Yeah, that's right. So we got some statistics today from the Department of Homeland Security about Trump's time in office, also before it. So we're looking at statistics from ICE since Trump's inauguration that show that the arrest of undocumented persons inside the U.S. climbed by 42% when compared to the same period last year.
Wow.
And this is increased enforcement. It's also that President Donald Trump, when he took office, signed an executive order undoing Obama administration policies that made it so immigration enforcement authorities would target undocumented immigrants for deportation who had committed serious crimes or recently entered the U.S., rather than a blanketed, undocumented immigration deportation policy. And then in addition to that, like you mentioned, arrests at the borders have dropped, which indicates that fewer people are attempting to make that trek.
So you could make the argument that he is succeeding on this then, right?
You could, yes.
Yeah. And what are they doing with these folks? I mean, are we locking them up? Is this a boon for the for-profit prison industry? Are we deporting them? What's happening to them? Do we know?
Yeah, we do know. I can't say that I know that issue in depth, but I do know that immigration courts right now are blocked up because more folks are being sent there. I do know that detention centers have more people in them because more people are being sent to detention centers. So yes, people are being held. They are going through the court system, and they are being deported.
There you go. All right. Did you hear the big story today, though? The big headline: Russia's being banned from next year's Winter Olympics.
I caught that.
Doping.
I didn't. Yeah. But that the individual athletes, right, are going to be given an opportunity to compete.
Yeah, but as a country, I guess they're out, right?
Yeah, that's right. I caught the headline just like you did, but it was something that Russia was booted for institutionalized doping, which is wild. That's a lot for a country to be kicked out of the Olympics.
Yeah, crazy times we live in. Anything else going on in the world there?
There's always plenty going on in the world. Something for you. The Navy has a new slogan.
Oh, I cannot wait.
The Navy has a new slogan. It's "Forged by the Sea." That's the slogan. Quote, "Forged by the sea," unquote. And it replaces their last slogan, which was a global force for good. You can see the difference there. Forged by the sea versus a global force for good. And what the Navy said that they're doing here is they're trying to attract 17 to 21-year-olds And I found this interesting as somebody who is not a centennial who this is targeted at, but as a millennial who's a little older than that, because the slogan, it seems like, and the ad campaign really plays into our egos. It's all about building yourself up. It's all about adventure. It's about opportunity. And yeah, just becoming a better version of oneself rather than creating a better world for, everyone else.
All right. Well, the first thing I thought of is not so much the 17 to 19 or 21-year-olds, more like the 7 to 10-year-olds.
The 7 to 10-year-olds.
Yeah, I mean, Little Mermaid, Under the Sea, Ursula singing Under the Sea.
Yes, I think that of course, right, if you have an advertising campaign for something that people are going to join at a certain age, you plant that seed earlier.
You cannot
then
start young
by the time
enough.
they get to the point of enlistment age, then they might be more likely to join.
There you go. All righty. Lori, I appreciate the time. Now I've got a new theme song. Great stuff.
All right.
Great stuff.
All right.
Thanks so much. Let's talk media news. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show. The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. That was the day that 7 employees at Detroit's Dodge truck plant stopped working to protest the firing of a union brother. When 5 of the 7 were fired for the stoppage, it sparked a wildcat strike. Another 320 workers downed their tools and left the plant. It was World War II. The Dodge truck plant had been converted into wartime production. Workers there built heavy trucks to ship to allies in China. The unions had signed on to a no-strike pledge after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt demanded labor peace to aid the war effort. Leaders of the AFL and CIO agreed to no strike, no lockout clauses. The CIO went even further and agreed to give up overtime pay. Most union members were not consulted on the pledge and did not vote on it. When they learned about the pledge after the fact, many workers who had just come off victorious organizing drives were in no mood to make concessions. They witnessed surging wartime profits for their employers and no cap on executive salaries, while they had to deal with wage freezes and rising inflation. Many were confronted with increasingly unsafe working conditions, violations of newly won contracts, and arbitrary discipline and firings. Despite the no-strike pledge, wildcat strikes were common. During the war, there were over 14,000 strikes involving more than 6 million workers. In 1944 alone, when the workers walked out at the Detroit Dodge truck plant, there had been more strikes in auto plants than at any other time in the auto industry's history. Workers found that short, spontaneous walkouts quickly resolved their grievances, regardless of the no-strike pledge. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So, yeah, again, you look at just the absolute insanity that's been going on here recently. And this tax thing is just absolutely just terrible on every front, just terrible. But yet, if you remember during the campaign, Donald Trump talked, extensively about how he was going to do something about the trade deficit. Now, he went to China, he did all of the handshaking and ring kissing, and the Chinese figured out, be nice to him, pat him on the head, say wonderful things, have children dance and sing and say how much they love him so that he doesn't actually do anything. So you had that whole display, and he, true to form, stabbed the last administration in the back on foreign land. But hey, that's another story. The trade numbers came out. Now, look, you can hear the rhetoric. You can hear the China talk. And you can, currency manipulator day one. We're going to fight all this stuff. Here's the reality. Reality is, according to the Commerce Department, the trade deficit for the month of October grew. And you go, Trump likes to be number one. Well, congratulations. You are now number one. Giant trade deficit. $48.7 billion trade deficit in the month of October. And just with China alone, we saw a $2.1 billion increase up to $31 billion trade deficit with China. And yet, no currency manipulator. I'm still waiting for some of the cases that are going through. Again, this is a guy who claims to be decisive. He ran on trade. And a lot of people I know voted for him on that specific item. Now, again, lots of talk. Talk is cheap, and we know that. It's time for Trump to stand up and stand up to these predatory practices. I mean, really, because we are losing jobs. And I just saw a report the other day that we are losing jobs right now, faster right now than we did at any time during the Obama administration. We are losing jobs to outsourcing right now faster than we did during the Obama administration. Now, understand, beginning of the Obama administration, most jobs were just going away. They weren't shipping anywhere. People were just going belly up because, of course, the Bush economy was in free fall. And it was Obama there to sweep up the mess. And really, bring us back around. If you remember, January, February, we were losing 1,900,000 jobs a month. We were in free fall. And again, the same people who were saying, no, we can't cut taxes, we can't afford deficit spending, no Keynes and prime the pump, are the exact same people who are saying if we give the rich people all this money, the $1.5 trillion that we're going to absorb in debt over the next decade. And if we give them, it will trickle down to us. Now, again, this comes back to very simple theories. The first being the obvious. Money in the economy helps. It does. The question is who gets it? Republicans and the Trumpians say that the very wealthy, and Reagan and a bunch of people, if we give it to the rich people, the really smart people, they know what to do with it, and it will benefit all of us. That hasn't worked. Study after study, economist after economist have proven. Doesn't work. Sorry. Rich people know what to do with the money. They make more money for themselves. It doesn't trickle down into larger paychecks. It doesn't trickle down into better standard of living. Now, on the other side, you've got Obama. And you can look at the two very distinct things that Bush and Obama did. Bush went the really political route. Said, we're gonna send everybody a check. And I got my Bush Prize too. He actually sent out a letter weeks before saying, hey, your Bush Prize is coming. Make sure you run to the mailbox. So every day people were running to the mailbox. My Bush Prize here, my Bush Prize. Oh, no Bush Prize today. Eventually the $300 Bush Prize came, but at a cost. It was about $18 million to tell us that it was coming. And then the administration of writing all the checks and doing all that stuff, you could argue it created a job or two. Obama decided, you know what, we need to get money into the economy. Simply made a cut in, and I would argue, I wish we would have paid for it. But 2% off your Social Security tax went right into people's paychecks. Their paychecks went up, and most people didn't even know it. But that money did get spent in the economy, and it did have a reverberation effect, and it was a good thing. This isn't that. This is ideologically saying, hey, we're going to be really rich. And we're going to give really rich people more tax cuts. Because that, my friend, that's what we do. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Exposing GOP half-truths, lies, and hypocrisy every weeknight from 9 to midnight. Rick Smith.
Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. That was the day that 7 employees at Detroit's Dodge truck plant stopped working to protest the firing of a union brother. When 5 of the 7 were fired for the stoppage, it sparked a wildcat strike. Another 320 workers downed their tools and left the plant. It was World War II. The Dodge truck plant had been converted into wartime production. Workers there built heavy trucks to ship to allies in China. The unions had signed on to a no-strike pledge after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt demanded labor peace to aid the war effort. Leaders of the AFL and CIO agreed to no strike, no lockout clauses. The CIO went even further and agreed to give up overtime pay. Most union members were not consulted on the pledge and did not vote on it. When they learned about the pledge after the fact, many workers who had just come off victorious organizing drives were in no mood to make concessions. They witnessed surging wartime profits for their employers and no cap on executive salaries, while they had to deal with wage freezes and rising inflation. Many were confronted with increasingly unsafe working conditions, violations of newly won contracts, and arbitrary discipline and firings. Despite the no-strike pledge, wildcat strikes were common. During the war, there were over 14,000 strikes involving more than 6 million workers. In 1944 alone, when the workers walked out at the Detroit Dodge truck plant, there had been more strikes in auto plants than at any other time in the auto industry's history. Workers found that short, spontaneous walkouts quickly resolved their grievances, regardless of the no-strike pledge. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and the Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So I've seen studies that claim, more money, better standard of living can make you happier. And look, it makes sense. I mean, if you're not worrying about where the next meal's coming from, if you're not worrying about the lights being shut off, life could, in fact, be much better. And today out in Pittsburgh, there was a press conference that I think did a little bit of that, where they said, look, people making above $15 an hour, life's a little bit better for them. And here to talk a little bit about the study that was done by the University of Pittsburgh, I've asked Jeffrey Shook to come talk with us. He's associate professor there at the University of Pittsburgh School of Social Work. Jeffrey, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on tonight, Rick.
Do I have you? Nope. We're going to give you the phone number for Jeffrey and get that done. We'll get him on the line when we get a chance. But here's the thing, and you go back to this moment of how do you get more wages into people's paycheck, and how does it make people's lives better? I've said, look, a decent living wage with some bit of benefits, with some bit of opportunity to make sure that you can pay the bills, make sure that you have the ability to, feed the kids, the work that you do. And this is one of those things that I keep coming back to. The work that you do should really, honestly, be able to support a family. And, we've talked about this a number of times, on how unionization rates, especially when you start talking about how when people, have the ability to bargain for better wages, hours, conditions, all of that. It's better opportunity. And look, the work that we do should be honored, should be respected. So you look at it, and in the healthcare industry, especially, I've spent some time, working and looking at, healthcare professionals and people who do the work right now out in Lebanon. There are nursing home workers who, some of them make 12, 13 bucks an hour. And the stories that they tell, just heartbreaking. They're working their behinds off. They care deeply about the people that they work with and the people that they work for and the patients. And yet they themselves are struggling to put food on the table and to make it to tomorrow and to be able to, just to make ends meet. And that's why, to me, it's a matter of a number of things. One, the dignity, the respect, the self-esteem that comes with a living wage job, the ability to make sure that you have the ability to support your family. And also, another reason why I support the Fight for 15 in a union campaign. To me, it is just that important. And that's why, again, I've asked Jeffrey Shook to come talk with us. He's the associate professor there at the University of Pittsburgh's School of Social Work. Jeffrey, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on tonight, Rick.
So I look at this press conference, and a lot of these studies, I often start off by going, I think we already know exactly what you're saying. More money makes people's lives better, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's true. But I do think studies like the one that we did help on a number of fronts. One, it really corroborates a lot of what we're hearing from these stories. So what we found with regard to the struggles of these workers really matches up what we hear when they tell their stories. The second thing that we found that I think is really important is these hardships do decrease when they see their wages increase. So we see studies about the economic cost of raising wages, lost jobs, or inflation. We see a lot of debate about that, but rarely do we say, what happens to their well-being. And we see that the raise that these workers that we surveyed received increased, their well-being a little bit. There's still a long way to go, but so I do think you're right that this makes a lot of sense, but I do think it's powerful to have this empirically.
Yeah. No, and look, the $15 an hour number seems to be, what people are debating over. And look, I think $15 an hour would make your life a little bit better, especially if you're talking about low-wage workers who have been able to get a number of, of government subsidies. There's the talk of raising the minimum wage up to $10.10 an hour. And I'm going, that's really not going to do anything because the raise you're going to have is basically just cutting off, LIHEAP or SNAP or, the earned income tax credit stuff that comes out. It just seems that there's no gain there. But at 15, lives, I think, get better, right?
Yeah, and we were able to compare workers of above and below 15. And the workers above 15, they still face some hardship.
Sure.
So it didn't all go away. So, I think we really have to think about how we support workers. But they had fewer hardships than those below 15. So, this does provide some evidence that by increasing those wages above 15, we begin to improve their lives.
Now, the people that you were studying and that you were looking at, as I understand, were from UPMC out in University of Pittsburgh Medical Center and the Allegheny General Hospital, right?
Yeah, we agreed not to name the hospital specifically, but it was a local hospital.
Okay.
The workers did unionize, and they negotiated a contract that was going to slowly bring them up to 15.
And the hospitals were okay with this? Because there's part of me that goes, look, if you're the hospitals, don't you want the best people who are coming to work without all of the world problems on their shoulders, coming to work happier, wanting to stay, being loyal? I would think that that's something that would be important to them.
Yeah, and we've had a number of productive meetings with the hospital, and they do have some interest in this. There's concerns that it will just be used to continue to fight for higher and higher wages. So there are some concerns there, but I think they also see the benefit. And so we're continuing those conversations with the hospitals because we also want to ask about other changes. And we have some questions that we've looked at, just other changes, including a voice within the hospital for workers. So greater voice in decisions that are made about their units or about their jobs. And from our qualitative interviews, we've heard a lot of positive stuff with regard to this greater voice in the hospital institution itself. So I do think the hospital has a lot to gain from this as well. And so we're going to continue to have these conversations.
No, I think they're important because, there have been a number of studies also done that union members are happier in the workplace because they have that voice than workers who don't. And I think that's one of those things that doesn't get told enough. And, as somebody who spent, 26 years in a union, I'll be honest with you. I had the ability to have input into my daily work. I had the ability to refuse to do things that I believed were unsafe. It empowered me to be, not just a good employee, but, a healthy, smart one.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And that's what we are hearing from workers. And there's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of concern amongst them about this, that they feel that can also improve their lives by having more say in the workplace.
Right. So now let me ask you the other side of this. Outside of having happier employees who may be a little healthier, a little bit more stable, how does this affect the family as a whole? How does it affect the children, the community? Anything on that?
Yeah, and we're going to dive deeper. So what we released today was some preliminary results. So we're going to dive deeper. But it's very true. So a lot of the work that I do is around kids and child well-being. And part of the argument that I continually make is we need to have parents with good, stable jobs where they are able to provide for kids. So we've heard a lot about how parents just don't have the time. They don't have the resources, even the little things, I want to take my kid to the zoo. I want to take my kid to the museum. A lot of these parents just don't have either the time or the money or both to do those kind of things. So we know that a lot of families, a lot of workers have to double up with families and friends, and that there's a lot of strategies that they borrow money from families and friends, and we've seen that decrease with the wage increase. So they do have these support networks, and the workers talk about how these networks are helpful, but they also don't want to keep going back to them. So there's a lot of dimensions here in terms of how this can improve the lives of children and families.
What do you say to the person, Jeffrey, who goes, well, that's the reason we have all of these safety net programs. We make sure that they're not going to freeze in the winter, make sure the kids get fed, make sure that they get health insurance, even though the Republicans in Washington have not passed an extension of the children's health insurance program. What do you say to the person who says, we've got this safety net for them. We don't need to raise wages. They're already making $15 an hour with all these other things.
Yeah, you just hit. They can't even come up with an extension of CHIP. That's immoral, in my opinion. Here's a program that works, right? It helps to get kids care, and when you're not even what we found in our data is that the workers don't really use these public benefits, whether it's because they're not eligible, because they're making just too much, or there's pride. We had some conversations with workers around this, whether it's the stigma associated with it, whether they don't know about the program. We had in our sample, pretty low use of public benefits. The Earned Income Tax Credit and LIHEAP were the two biggest, and SNAP was lower. It was the third on the list, but other programs weren't used much at all. So it could be that a lot of these workers are making just enough that they're not eligible for those programs, and so they're not getting those supports at all, but they're not making enough to make ends meet.
Yeah, and back to the CHIP thing, it's to me not just immoral. I think it should be criminal, because look, this used to be a bipartisan thing, and I don't know how we've gotten this crazy this fast. But when you're saying that we're not going to make sure that children, the party of we love the children and we want to make sure all of them are born, to not give them health insurance is just maddening to me.
Yeah, and we are, our safety net is not very strong anyway, right?
No, it's pathetic.
You have to be really struggling to be able to be eligible for some of these programs. And there's a lot of stigma associated with these programs. So
And not just the,
I
not
don't
just the
think we should
stigma,
rely.
and not just the stigma, the obstacles and the barriers that they've thrown in front of a lot of these programs is just insane to me. I know when during the Corbett administration they put an asset test on people getting food stamps. I'm like, really? Someone who's got $2,000 worth of stuff, you're not going to give them food stamps? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there's the obstacles in terms of the eligibility, and there's the obstacles in terms of what you have to go through to even get, and how people are dissuaded from getting a lot of these programs. So yeah, on another front, in this argument, why should we be subsidizing employers who are making a lot of money? Right? There's a lot of money in these hospitals in Pittsburgh that we're at. So, the fact that we have to subsidize even to the degree that we are, I think, is problematic.
It's absolutely crazy. What are you hoping comes out of this study that you guys have done? And I was reading through it, and a lot of it was, I'll be honest, I read through a lot of it and going, yeah, this is stuff that I would hope we already knew. I'm glad it's in one place that we can go, here, this, in case you're not really bright and don't understand that, paying someone a decent livable wage is going to make not just their lives better, but their families and their communities better. What are you hoping comes out of this?
I'm hoping we can, because I appreciate your point there that yes, we should understand this, and there is data out there that shows this, but a lot of people don't know the struggle that these workers and their families are going through. So for a lot of people, it's not within their wheelhouse. So we hope to educate people. We think the mixed methods approach to it, so we have the numbers that you're looking at, and then we also have the stories that dive deeper into the lives of the workers. And tonight I was at a meeting where we presented some of these results to workers, and we heard more stories. And so we really hope to do that, the public education part of it, but also to engage more with policymakers, and to really push them. At the press conference this morning, we had the mayor's office and several city council members. So really to engage with policymakers about ways that we can creatively think about better supporting these workers, as well as really pushing them to demand fair wages for these workers.
Yeah, and at the end of it, maybe push back on some of the memes that are out there, lazy worker, lazy people, and all this. It's just mind blowing to me. Well, let me ask you, kind of
workers.
It's nuts.
These are really hardworking people who take a lot of pride in the work that they do, and it's amazing. It's really amazing to me that they continue to go and do such a good job given what they're facing.
Oh, I'm absolutely with you. And I've always said that, the lower, it seems like the lower you're paid, the less you're paid, the harder you actually physically work.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, the stories we hear, about the demands on these workers, it's tough.
Yeah, and not just that. I mean, also the abuse and the discrimination and the harassment and all of that stuff go along with it. Anything while you were doing this that surprised you? I mean, this is what you do for a living. Was there anything that caught your attention? You go, I did, because like I said, this is what I expected. Anything that surprised you?
The relatively low public benefit use surprised me. So other studies that have looked at, there hasn't been a lot of work, as I said before, there hasn't been a lot of work looking at, as we think about this wage increase from 7, 8, 9, 10, up to this mark of 15, there hasn't been a lot that has really followed workers to say, well, what does this mean for them? But a few of the studies that have touched on these kind of issues have found higher public benefit use among the workers they were looking at. So that did surprise me, the relatively low public benefit use.
Now, were those people out of Pennsylvania, or were they here in Pennsylvania? Because I would argue Pennsylvania is one of the most unfriendly states for people to navigate a lot of these social programs and a lot of the programs like unemployment or your food stamps or any of that other stuff.
Yeah, and that could be, these studies were not done in Pennsylvania, so it could be different systems set up in those states with the public benefits, yes.
Now, as I argue we should, as a working class person, I want those programs to be much easier to access, to make sure that we don't have people falling behind. And yes, there may be 1 or 2 people out there cheating or getting something that they shouldn't, but the number of people that we send away because of these obstacles, to me, is just flat out wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree that the usage is a lot less than eligibility would suggest.
Well, as this continues, I'd love to have you come back and tell us more of what you find and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, no, I'd love to come back and talk about it again. This was a first dive into it, and to really start engaging with, with stakeholders and with the union members themselves. So we're going to keep collecting data, and we're going to keep talking to people about this because, again, as I said, I do agree that, yeah, this makes sense, what we're finding. But at the same time, I think we have to talk to as many people as we can so that they get this picture as well.
I absolutely agree. Jeffrey, thanks so much. I appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me on.
Good stuff. And if you want to take a look at the study, we'll make sure that we get a link at thericksmithshow.com so you can take a look at it and see what I saw. Look, I think we know, but it's good to see just how this is working. We're going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Got the talk.
I was excited when the kids are united. They can never be defined as yesterday. There's a brand new show today.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 2008. That was the day UE Local 1110 members at Republic Windows in Chicago began a 5-day occupation to protest the imminent closure of their plant. A month earlier, Republic workers witnessed management moving machinery out of the factory. They began monitoring where the machinery was going and soon learned it was headed for a new non-union plant in Iowa. They planned a possible plant occupation. By December 2nd, management announced the plant was closing in just 3 days. Republic Windows owner Richard Gelman blamed Bank of America for refusing to extend credit just as the federal government had bailed out the banks in a $700 billion deal. Workers learned they would receive no severance or vacation pay despite WARN Act mandates. The next day, they rallied out in front of Bank of America chanting, "You got bailed out, we got sold out." Workers were determined to occupy the plant that Friday when they went to pick up their last paychecks. Police refused to remove the sit-downers, and the occupation quickly made national news. Local labor leaders and trade unionists, activists, and politicians all visited strikers and lent their support. Journalist Carrie Liderson recounts the events in her book Revolt on Goose Island, noting the donations of food, blankets, pillows, sleeping bags, and other necessities that poured into the factory. Protests of Bank of America spread across the country. By the following Wednesday, workers learned that though they could not keep their plant open, they would at least win severance and vacation pay. In 2012, some of those workers reopened that plant under the name New Era Windows as a worker-run cooperative. They specialize in energy-efficient vinyl windows. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Employees are paid, and again, you go back to exactly what is it in the in this administration that workers saw as positive. Evidently, yesterday they came out with a new plan that's detailing how the Department of Labor is intending to roll back some protections on what is known on their tip pooling rule. And this is, one of these scenarios where if you work in a restaurant or a place where you get paid through tips, that everybody throws money into kind of a pool and it's divvied up. Well, what it appears what they're looking at doing, because understand, the waitresses, they get the tips because they're the ones out front. Maybe you throw a couple of bucks to the busboy, but the cooks or the dishwashers, they don't seem to get anything. So the theory here is that we're going to take the tip money, put it into a big pool, and make sure that the busboys, the dishwashers, and the cooks all get a taste of that. The bartenders, all of that. And I got to be honest. There's part of me goes, okay, I kind of see that, but maybe we should be paying, because I'm actually against the idea of tipping. I think the employee should just be paid a reasonable wage and be done with it. But what's going to end up happening, according to what I've seen, is, well, what's going to happen is they're going to throw this money into a big pot. The employers are going to make sure that the employees get paid minimum wage, and they're going to pocket the rest. I mean, we've seen this movie. I've heard horror stories of how this works out. And, as I've been saying for a while, the idea that this administration has, workers' minds, workers', issues at heart is just nuts. Now understand, waitresses get paid a whopping federal minimum wage of $2.13 an hour. I think Pennsylvania's is up to like $2.90, $2.93 or something like that. It hasn't been raised on the federal level in more than 20 years. And again, you come back and say, these are the people who are struggling the most. These are those folks that Jeffrey was talking about. While they studied hospital workers, these are the people who are struggling to make ends meet. These are the folks who can't afford to take a day off. These are the folks who can't afford to, pick their kids up from school when they're sick, can't afford to take them to the zoo or do any of those things. It's really just kind of insane. But this is what this administration, what they're focused on. They're focused on making sure that the 1%, the wealthiest of the wealthy, that they're well-heeled, well taken care of, and well-funded, while working people like tipped employees are going to end up getting the shaft. Is that fair? Is that right? Is that just? And I would argue any working person would say no. Now, again, back to the class war idea, the employer class would say yes. We should be able to take from what our workers make and put in our own pockets, as long as they're making minimum wage. And you go, well, Rick, then you could just go somewhere else. And I love that argument. I love the argument of, well, you could just go somewhere else, when the sad reality is if all the employers are doing it, where are you going to go? I mean, honestly, where are you going to go? Nowhere. And this is the problem with having administrations like this. Every Republican administration that I can remember has taken shots at working people. And it blows my mind of why anyone would consider voting for it. It's just mind-blowing. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is it fair? Is it right? Is it just? Should it be allowed? Are we okay with the Trump administration through? I know that I am certainly not. I'll take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
People are hungry. Me and my people are through. Me and my people are ready. Me and my people are just about due. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out. We're coming out swing.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1955. That was the day the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations merged to become the AFL-CIO. The American Federation of Labor was a confederation of unions that can trace its roots all the way back to just after the Civil War in 1866. Samuel Gompers initially established the Federation of Organized Trades and Labor Unions, which reorganized as the American Federation of Labor. This group was comprised of craft unions and represented primarily skilled laborers. However, as industrialization grew, many union organizers believed in the idea of industrial unions. They wanted to expand to organize more unskilled workers by industry. John L. Lewis, head of the United Mine Workers Union, was one union leader who wanted this change. Out of this idea, the Committee of Industrial Unions was formed as part of the American Federation of Labor. This group felt its issues were being ignored by the AFL. As a result, in 1938, it split from the AFL and became the Congress of Industrial Organizations. Members of the CIO included the United Mine Workers, the United Auto Workers, and the United Steel Workers. The 1950s were a high point for labor unions in the United States. 1/3 of all the nation were members of unions. However, both the AFL and the CIO were concerned about the future of organized labor. The Taft-Hartley Act, passed in 1947 over the veto of President Harry S. Truman, made organizing more difficult. The two groups realized they would be more effective if they banded together under one roof. The American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations merged to become today's AFL-CIO. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Because the gays are getting married, that is why people die and children go unfed. When I'm sad and alone and I'm wondering just why I'm living about my life, it's feeling like it's going down a toilet bowl. It's good to know it's 'cause the gays.
Ah, yes, it's the gays. It's all their fault. No cakes. No cakes for you. How crazy is it that in this day and age we're fighting over cake? I mean, it's just, and the positions you hear people taking are just ludicrous. I mean, I tweeted out today that, this isn't my country. This is not the country that I want for my children. This is not the future. This kind of hatred and discrimination. Look, if you're against gay marriage, there's a simple solution. Don't marry a person of the same sex. That's pretty simple, don't you think? Worry about yourself. As my grandfather always said, worry about yourself. Don't worry about me. And this whole thing over the cake is just crazy. And here to talk a little bit about it and share some thoughts, I've asked Matthew Chapman to come to talk with us. He's a contributor over at Share Blue. Matthew, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for letting me on the show.
So what do you think? No cake. No cake for those people, Matthew. None.
Well, here's the way I look at it. So the baker at the heart of the case is claiming that it is his right of free expression not to be compelled to bake a cake for gays. So here's my freedom of expression protects what he does in the kitchen. It doesn't protect what he does at the cash register. And here's what I mean by that. What I mean is that it could be argued that, the way he decorates the cake, the way he actually builds the cake is part of his freedom of expression as an artist. So, I think you could argue that that he would be protected if he didn't want to, say, bake a rainbow cake. But that's not what he's doing. What he's saying is that he's refusing to provide the exact same type of cake to a gay couple that he would provide to straight couples.
Right.
And that's not an issue of freedom of expression. That's an issue of public accommodation.
Yeah, I don't buy the other argument, to be honest with you. The whole artist nonsense. You're baking a cake. It is what it is. I can go in the Yellow Pages. I can find in the Yellow Pages a place to get a cake. I come to you, I ask for a cake, and you're telling me, no, sorry, that isn't right. But what do you say to the person who makes that argument? There are other cake bakers out there, Matthew. They should just go somewhere else.
Well, the problem with that argument is that, you can't really contain it. You can't, it's a short hop from there to say that any business can discriminate against any protected class person.
Okay. So I don't like you because you have brown hair. No cake for you.
Yeah, or you could discriminate based on race. But one interesting argument that I got into, so I was debating earlier with a fellow who's supportive of the baker, and I asked him a question that he didn't really have any answers to.
And what was that?
So this baker
it's specifically saying, he'll sell any pastry to these guys except a wedding cake because he doesn't believe in gay marriage. So what I asked was, what if there was a baker who was against school integration, and so he refuses to bake graduation cakes for black students? He'll sell any other kind of cake, just not a graduation cake.
That's a good question. He had no answer?
No, he didn't have an answer to that.
Well, I guess the answer would be, well, they've already taken the racial discrimination out of that. That's the law. The argument would be that sexual orientation is a choice. That's the one I love the best.
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, the problem. I mean, the way I would. I mean, the response I have to that is that, being. Being gay is an ontological issue, the exact same way that race is. People dishonestly conflate being gay with engaging in a sex act.
Okay. And as I've said, if that's not what you want to do, don't do it. That simple.
Right.
So, but here's the other part of this, and this is where I generally end this argument, because to me, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but this really isn't an issue against the couple, or really even about the cake. This is really an assault on states' rights and the state of Colorado being able to have non-discrimination laws. And this is something that I would think that the right wing should be all in favor of. States' rights. The state should be able to decide. Don't we hear that nonsense all the time? States should be able to decide. If they want non-discrimination laws, they should be able to have it, no?
It doesn't work that way. You see, states are only allowed to have rights when they restrict the rights of other people. That's how it works in the right way.
Okay. That seems kind of dumb, but I can see the logic in it. But here's the thing. I mean, and I guess, again, I go back to my grandfather who always said, don't worry about what else somebody else is doing. Worry about yourself. How is this that this is this big of a deal? This is an infringement on your religious belief. I mean, if you are that rigid in your ideological religious belief, isn't that kind of the antithesis of being a Christian?
It is, and it's also, I believe people with these sorts of, mental hang-ups about providing basic services for their fellow man because of a basic aspect of who they are, they should ask themselves why they're in the job they're in.
That's a good point. I mean, why is he baking cakes? Good question. How do you think this is going to go? I mean, there was a lot of speculation about Anthony Kennedy and some of the pointed questions, because Kennedy has been someone who has been on the side of same-sex marriage. He's written about equality and he's done some, but there are some voices who are saying maybe on this, maybe he flips the other way. And I got to tell you, I'm not too comfortable with Anthony Kennedy being the guy who.
Well, I mean, the questions that he posed at oral argument did make it sound as though he was worried about the religious liberty of the baker, or about. It made it sound as though he might be erring once again on the side of business transaction speech. But, I don't think that we can, completely write him off yet. I think that he is worried about his legacy, and I think that therefore it is in his interest to, if he does rule in favor of the baker, create a very narrowly tailored rule.
Yeah, and very narrow. But here's the thing, because this could open if it goes the other way. If he rules fully in the side of the baker, this could be really a slippery slope where, I saw someone today saying, we should, I think it was Trump who said, we should hang signs outside. And, I actually know who said it. I just saw it online. We should be able to hang.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
That was it. We should be able to hang signs outside to tell us, who's allowed and who's not allowed.
Yep. And, the funny thing is that Kennedy himself posed that exact same question in oral argument, and he seemed uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, I see. I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm uncomfortable with this kind of division, this kind of ripping us apart at the seams. Look, I may not be thrilled with what other people do, but that's their right and their business to do. As long as their rights don't infringe upon mine, they have the right to do whatever they want. If they want to buy a cake, they should be able to buy a cake. If you're in, and help me here, because it's my thought that if you're in business and you're open to the public, you're in the yellow pages, hey, we make cakes for everybody, that because you're covered by laws of this country, you should be covered by laws of not just the country, but the state that you live in. And Colorado, again, going back to that states' rights thing, has a non-discrimination law.
Exactly. That's exactly right. You know, you should honor the law. You should honor the laws of your state when those laws, as long as those laws do not discriminate against people. And Colorado set up a terrific law that protects people.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I want to move on because we're going to go from cakes to pedophiles. I look at Alabama. The polls uncomfortably close for me. I got to be honest. I look at the fact that you've got multiple women, women now who were saying when they were young girls, Roy Moore was chasing after him. You've got a party and a machine in the right wing who are not just attacking these women, but denying the existence of evidence. And then, of course, changing the conversation because it's now going to be about cake and abortion, I guess, the latest messaging coming out of Alabama. What do you think is going on down there?
Well, I would say that the biggest thing here is that, first of all, the media to some degree got bored with the story, unfortunately, which means that, it's not, which has given more supporters a lot of time to regroup and come up with character assassination for the victim, which has really hurt things. There's also, having lived in the South for a large part of my life, cannot discount the fact that Southerners, as a general principle, really resent what they perceive to be outside influence in their politics. I think that as Alabama Republicans feel as though the national landscape is paying attention to them, they sort of have a tendency to rally.
So basically, we'll show you. We'll do exactly everything against what you want us to do.
Right, and that's sort of what Trump's whole election was about. People who just wanted a way to stick it to people.
And on a certain level, I kind of get that, but I mean, we're talking about a guy, honestly, who's 30-some years old, chasing after 14, 15, 16-year-old girls, calling them at school, sending them, cards and writing in their yearbooks. I mean, how creepy is that? That a 30-year-old man is
banned from a mall was my question.
Exactly. How do you get banned from a mall in the 80s? You're absolutely right. But here again, I guess his question is the same as my question. Why did it take this long for this stuff to come out? Especially because, I've had people tell me it's the open secret down there. It's like everybody knew, but nobody really cared.
Well, that's the unfortunate reality of the thing is that women have, for decades, tended to stay silent about this sort of thing because they feel there aren't the structures of support in place that protect them when they come forward with this sort of information.
Yeah, good point. And I look at the last woman who came forth. She said, for years she wore it as a badge of honor because while she was in high school, she was dating a 30-year-old ADA. And you go, really? Where were your parents?
Yeah, and for that matter, Moore, I keep thinking back to Moore's claim that he would never date a younger girl without the parents' permission. If the girl is young enough that you need to ask their mother for permission, that's a huge red flag, regardless of whether she says yes or no.
That's a good point. I mean, I did ask my mother-in-law to marry my wife, but we were in our 30s. That's a whole nother story.
I did that too, and we were both in our 20s. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, because I keep putting myself in this scenario, in this situation, because I have a 15-year-old daughter. If a 32-year-old man came knocking on my door and asked my wife if he could date my 15-year-old daughter, I don't know if my wife would be harmed in me running after him. I don't know. I'm not quite sure, but it wouldn't be long before my hands were around his neck.
That's the most amazing thing to me. I don't doubt that most of the Republicans who are defending Moore, I don't doubt that most of them would have the exact same reaction if Moore went after one of their daughters. I don't know how they mentally reconciled this in their heads that it's okay as long as it's not affecting them.
Yeah. I've seen some of the messaging coming out that, well, we'd rather have Roy Moore than one of them there Democrats. So in their minds, a pedophile is better than a Democrat.
I know, but here's an interesting thing that I recently saw. There was recently a poll that came out that focused specifically on Republican voters in Alabama who said that they had not considered voting for his opponent, Doug Jones. Civil rights hero, prosecuted state, JK, all that. So interestingly, contrary to the stories we're hearing in the media, abortion was not actually one of the big reasons. It was only about 8% of voters said that was the reason they were never considering voting for Jones.
Okay. What was the reason?
36% said they just don't like him, and 27% said they didn't know. 10% said they didn't know anything about him. So, there's weird things happen in special elections. I think this is really going to come down to turnout above anything.
Of course. And I mean, I think the 538 came out and said, how Doug Jones can win. And it's, we need record turnout. The African-American communities in Huntsville and Birmingham and all those, they have to come out and the rural areas have to stay home. And you go, well, duh. You could say that about any place. Keep the rural areas down, keep the urban areas vote up, and you got a shot, especially in a place like Alabama. But the question is how do you get some of those crossover votes of people who are just not comfortable? I mean, I looked today, I saw Jeff Flake. I don't know if you saw this, but Jeff Flake actually wrote a Senator Flake from Arizona, wrote a $100 check and sent it to Doug Jones today. Because with the country over party in the what it's for line. Because, there gotta be Republicans who go, look, we'll take the Democrat. At least he's not a pedophile. I mean, really, and I'm a little older than you are. I never thought in politics you would ever find a candidate viable who, one, sided with the Russians, or two, was a pedophile. I mean, I'm just mind blown.
I gotta be honest. I mean, you may be older than me, but I'm old enough to have long thought that was impossible too.
And yet here we are.
Yep. Well, I mean, I think that it is a tricky proposition because unlike in say Virginia, where all kinds of outside support came in on both sides to mobilize their voters as best they could. As I say, in Alabama, there's just this hardcore culture of the state deciding for itself, of not accepting outsiders. So it's also eternal question of how do you help Jones without appearing to help him.
Yeah, no, and look, I saw his ad that they tried to put out to reach some of the moderate Republicans, talking nicely about a Confederate general, which really just sent the African American community into a fit. Because you're trying to reach out with one hand while somebody else is smacking you. I thought the ad I saw it and I'm going, really? Bad idea. And quickly they got rid of that. But how do you reach those middle Alabama voters who and pull them to your side? I mean, it's one of those.
I mean, it is a fundamental question. But I'm inclined to think that those voters who were disgusted enough with Moore to be swayed have been swayed.
Yeah,
that is what it is, and I think that from here on, it's got to stop.
Yeah, it's got to be a get out the vote. So, give me a prediction. You think I've seen numerous polls, 50-47 Jones, 50-47 Moore. I've seen polls right in that neck and neck race, and of course, as you've said, it's going to come out to turnout. How do you see things going there?
I honestly think it could be anyone's game here. I honestly to go back to Virginia again, those polls were all over the map too, and to some degree that's a good sign. It means that the pollsters are using a bunch of different independent models to track the race, and they aren't like herding together, which can tend to produce a greater error in the long run. I would say that I would argue that at the moment, after the past couple of weeks, with the trends that I mentioned before, I still put Jones as underdog, but I think that he absolutely could still pull it off.
Yeah, got a shot. So let me ask you the last line of questioning on this then, because the other side of this is now that Trump has with a full throat endorsement, go get him, Roy, and the RNC is back funding and back involved in this. What do the Republicans do in the Senate if he is elected? Do they pursue an ethics investigation? Is there a way to pursue not seating him? Do you see anything playing out there?
Well, I mean, the Supreme Court has pretty clearly ruled in the 66 he has to at least be. But they also said that expulsion by a third vote is perfectly fine. I don't know at this point, given everything that McConnell has said, given everything that other senior Republicans have said, that they would actually try to do that. The very, very least that they could do for the sake of their decency is to not give him committee assignments. Like, he really wants to end up on the Judiciary Committee, which, you know, for obvious reasons, he's thrown off the state Supreme Court twice is a terrible idea.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. And look, I think personally, if he wins, they're gonna do some kind of a dog and pony show. Maybe he gets to wear his little cowboy costume. Maybe he doesn't. They'll tap him
around with that tiny pistol.
They'll tap him on the wrist, tell him to sit down and be quiet in the corner for a little bit, and in 6 months he'll be allowed to be as crazy and as radical and as ridiculous as he's going to be, and moving us one step closer to the theocracy that people like him and Pence and others want to take this country.
Absolutely, and it's important to note before all of this, all of the allegations of child molestation came up, there's going to be the most extreme radical Senate candidate in basically generations.
Yeah.
He is pretty much alone. He would be pretty much alone, even among the current far-right crop of senators, in believing that the Bible literally trumps man's law.
Oh no, I fully see him saying, let's get rid of that there Constitution thing. Put this book there. It's just he's that scary. I mean,
he effectively does do that.
I know.
He claims to support the Constitution, but does it by basically interpreting it to mean the opposite of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, Pence scares me. This guy scares me more. Matthew, I appreciate the time and your thoughts. Thanks so much. Look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely. You have a great night.
Good time. I appreciate your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. That was the day that 7 employees at Detroit's Dodge truck plant stopped working to protest the firing of a union brother. When 5 of the 7 were fired it sparked a wildcat strike. Another 320 workers downed their tools and left the plant. It was World War II. The Dodge truck plant had been converted into wartime production. Workers there built heavy trucks to ship to allies in China. The unions had signed on to a no-strike pledge after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt demanded labor peace to aid the war effort. Leaders of the AFL and CIO agreed to no strike, no lockout clauses. The CIO went even further and agreed to give up overtime pay. Most union members were not consulted on the pledge and did not vote on it. When they learned about the pledge after the fact, many workers who had just come off victorious organizing drives were in no mood to make concessions. They witnessed surging wartime profits for their employers and no cap on executive salaries, while they had to deal with wage freezes and rising inflation. Many were confronted with increasingly unsafe working conditions.
violations of newly won contracts, and arbitrary discipline and firings. Despite the no-strike pledge, wildcat strikes were common. During the war, there were over 14,000 strikes involving more than 6 million workers. In 1944 alone, when the workers walked out at the Detroit Dodge truck plant, there had been more strikes in auto plants than at any other time in the auto industry's history. Workers found that short, spontaneous walkouts quickly resolved their grievances, regardless of the no-strike pledge.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain. Back, Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Again, our favorite crazy guy, Daryl Metcalf. And this is one of those moments where you go, what exactly is wrong with people? I mean, honestly and truthfully, you've got good old Daryl, who evidently was at a committee hearing. And it's just one of those things where you go, really? Evidently, one of his colleagues touched him on the arm. Touched him on the arm, he did. And it sent Daryl Metcalf off into a tizzy. Evidently, he, not thrilled at being touched, leapt out, said, I'm a heterosexual. He said, look, I'm a heterosexual. I have a wife, and I love my wife. I don't like men, as you might, but stop touching me all the time. He then added, quote, it's like, keep your hands to yourself. Like, if you want to touch somebody, you have people on your side of the aisle that might like it. I don't. Now, the guy who touched him, this Representative Bradford, who, according to the reports here, also married with 4 children, just laughed. And that, I got to tell you, is the right response for crazy people. I mean, honestly, at some point, you just have to look at them and laugh at them and go, I feel sorry for you. There's maybe help available. I'm not sure where we can get it for you, but you certainly need the help. And look, Metcalf's one of these lunatics off on the fringe. And it's amazing to me that people in his district continue to vote for this crackpot. And because he does this kind of stuff all the time. And these are the kind of people who give government really a bad name. And these are the kind of ideologues who, don't touch me. I'm not like you, married with kids. It kind of makes me think, and this is one of those things, it kind of makes me think that, you know what? Maybe Daryl's got something going on in the closet. Just kind of a thought. You gotta wonder. You gotta wonder. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or